Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice, the podcast where the heart of agriculture meets the pulse of today's industry. From policy changes to leadership stories in the Western lifestyle, The Rancher's Voice dives into the stories that matter most to ag producers.
Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice. I'm Raylee Honeycutt, joined with Ellie Brighton here in studio, and online today we have three folks from the Montana Stock Growers who recently returned from the Young Cattlemen's Conference, which was held in June, and excited to have them all joining us. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi.
Excellent. Well, in no particular order, we're just going to go around and quickly have you guys do a quick introduction of yourselves, starting with Garrett.
Yeah, I'm Garrett Harshbarger. I'm a third-generation rancher from Waterloo, Montana. We run a cow-calf operation.
Awesome. And how about Leoma?
Yeah, my name is Leoma Donsbach, and my husband and I run commercial cows here in Roy, Montana. So that's north of Lewistown, for those of you guys who don't know. And that's just excited to be here.
And Chance.
I'm Chance Wilson from Scobey, cow-calf operation. We've been, I think my great-grandparents settled here in 1909.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, and congratulations for representing Montana stock growers at the Young Cattlemen's Conference this year. Overall, for our listeners who may not be familiar with what YCC is, we'll kind of hand it over to you and let you guys explain the experience and kind of what the event was about. We'll see which leadership training took effect.
I was going to say, I'll kick it off, and then the voice can chime in because they do that well on filling in all the gaps. So, what Young Cattlemen's Conference is put on by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and it brings in young folks from all over the industry, all different segments, in fact. And with our class, we had a few over 60. I think there were 62 total of us. And it's just a wonderful experience to have that melting pot of ideas, different life experiences. We were all kind of different ages, and everyone just came together and figured out how we can step up and better assist with advocacy and really helping our state affiliates to solve some of these issues and challenges that we have facing our industry.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off that. It was, I couldn't believe how great of an experience it was. Like, it truly was one of the best experiences of my life, and probably met some of the greatest people I've ever met on this trip. It was awesome.
Yeah, I would agree with what both of them have said. The connections we made there were really awesome, and like seeing the industry at that scale, like I had never seen packing plants and things like that, and just to see what that end of everything looks like was really cool.
So Garrett, you mentioned the packing plants. Can you kind of walk us through, Garrett, what your itinerary looked like from start to finish? Because it's a big commitment. You guys are on the road for about 9 or 10 days and travel all across the US. So Garrett, tell us a little bit about how it started and where you guys went.
Yeah, so we all kind of met up to start with in Denver. We fly in and we kind of spend 3 days at the NCBA headquarters there and do trainings and things like that. And then from there, we jump on a plane and kind of go across the U.S. We went to Sioux City and saw the packing plant, went to Ohio and saw certified Angus beef, and then kind of ended the trip traveling to D.C. and spending a few days there.
Excellent. Any favorite stops for the three of you?
I would say CAB was probably my favorite spot.
My favorite was the Tyson plant, which was interesting because I've been in quite a few packing plants over the years. But to Garrett's original comment about the size and scale, 40 acres under roof, 4,200 employees, 32 languages spoken on site. From the time from its knock to cooler is 48 minutes, capacity of 390 animals an hour, 5,500 a day. To step into something of that size was just truly, it was wild. And to see the efficiency. I mean, we have regional packing facilities, obviously, but the efficiency of every single part of that carcass is going somewhere. And and the way they utilize it is pretty incredible.
For me, the packing plant was probably the coolest thing we saw. But Wooster, Ohio, where certified Angus beef is, that's a nice place. I like that town. So
Yeah, the campus was like the CAB campus was pretty incredible.
And I heard you guys had probably the best meal of your trip there as well.
The best 6 meals we had were there.
It was like Thanksgiving for like 2 days at CAB. I mean, it was tremendous. Their chefs really outdid themselves. But I do have to say, it was a close second on my plate to the beef, the banana pudding. They need to, I know that they just threw that together, but that needs to go in a cookbook somewhere because that was the best banana pudding I've ever had in my entire life.
What insights, I guess we've chatted about it a little bit with what you guys have talked about and what you've seen in Leoma, what you said about the scale and the efficiency and stuff of the packing plants, but um what what experiences, I guess, what did you guys take home from both CAB and the packing plants that you think that ranchers maybe don't quite know or kind of need to hear and understand from you guys now that you've been there?
One thing that I learned is this is, I mean, we're small scale. We're in the whole grand scheme of what we do. There's so much more that goes into it than just the cow calf guy. We need everybody. We need the feedlots. We need the packer. We need to all work together and not fight about stuff. Just working together is very important to me.
That's a great point, Chance. I think that was the drive home, Ellie, was it takes all of us, right? Like this industry is not made up of our individual parts, it's made up of the whole. And so that is something that having those experiences and if you don't raise black-hided cattle, sometimes we forget about the value of CAB. But CAB has driven the quality of cattle up in this entire nation, doesn't matter what hide color. They really set that bar to a level where now 84% of animals coming across the rail are choice or better, it produced in the United States. And so it really, the experience of seeing that and being a part of that and really visiting with those folks, we have more in common than we have differences.
So we mentioned that it kind of is all kinds of kinds within the livestock industry, but the group that you traveled with was very unique as well and had a variety of different perspectives and walks of life. Talk to us a little bit about the people and the peers that you interacted with in that peer-to-peer learning that is a huge component of YCC.
yeah, so like the biggest takeaway I had of it was like there were feeders, there were packer guys, there was cow calf guys, stalkers, there was people who just like egg and are getting into it. Like there was a bunch of different stuff. But like the commonality like that was there was just that an egg, like there's kind of a common sense of values or like community, and everybody can communicate no matter where you're from or what you do. Like we actually meshed really well. It didn't take long to start finding those connections, and like everybody was talking and laughing and having a good time and learning.
What do you think the greatest thing that you were able to teach folks from a Montana perspective was?
I think that we're all just at different stages because sometimes people look at Montana as being a maturing, with Chance being on the land since 1909. Having Garrett and I there saying that there's still people coming in to, cow calf production that necessarily are starting out and we're figuring it out along the way. I think that was surprising to some people, thinking that of Montana as being, back to the 1800s and having a certain way of doing things. I think they were also surprised by the land values. We talked a lot about land values, Garrett especially. And so it really clicked with them and resonated what we're dealing with. And especially from predation, the different unique things that make Montana Montana. That was great conversation to expose them to that.
And conversely, what do you guys think you picked up from people from other states that surprised you?
Oh, I mean, I learned a lot about the feedlots and what they do, and I mean, what we should be doing to help them out and what they can do to help us out as well.
I learned that the snakes down in Florida will eat calves, and that scared me.
So there's predators everywhere.
I learned a lot about gators from our friend to Louisiana. My goodness, I sat next to him every bus ride I could learn more about alligators and how they factor into their decisions down there. But I think we all got educated on New World screwworm. That was something that, really was paramount during our conversations about how that's going to impact our whole industry, even though we're protected by our climate from that being catastrophic as far as physically to our animals. When that comes in to the US, it's going to be vital for us to get that out, eradicated again.
Well, I think that's kind of a good segue. I mean, you guys ended your trip with visits to Capitol Hill and DC to meet with members of Congress, our delegation. So tell us a little bit about what that experience was like and what you guys talked about there.
I
It was
think
hot.
it was hot. Well, I didn't get real hot till I lost my phone in the Uber. Anyway, but it was good to I mean, uh, talk to them and realize they're just humans too. Like they're no more special than us, and they're there to help us and listen to us.
Well, I was gonna say what was fascinating to Chance's point is how much they really do rely on those of us with boots on the ground to supply them with information. I wasn't aware of how instrumental that can be in their everyday decision making. So that inspired me would be the appropriate response to continue, I guess, sending them information about what we're dealing with. That does make an impact when you think that they're untouchable. So I really like how Chance led into that. They're just like us.
Now, Garrett, it was your first trip to DC, I believe, kind of in this capacity, lobbying, and many of your guys' first times meeting with the congressional delegation. Um, kind of higher level away from the like nitty gritty and the details and the topics that we talked about. What was your overall impression of DC? Like, it is it is a daunting and sometimes scary place to go to, especially if you've never been there before and just maneuvering the buildings and the traffic and all of that. What was your overall impression, and do you have a different impression now that you kind of went through it?
It was hot. Way, way, way hot. But other than that, I guess I wasn't aware of just like how it's all the business there. Like everybody's dressed up, everybody's hustling and bustling. Like there's not a slow second there, really. I mean, it's not crazy like Vegas or anything, but it's pretty busy. And um, that was pretty neat. And then it was kind of neat how like you walk into the building and the senators are all there doing their work, and you walk into the next building and there's people there, and it's just like it's very open. Like you have the opportunity to go there and meet people, and they're not untouchable. I guess was kind of the Chance's point. But.
Yeah, I'd been to Philadelphia, New York, stuff like that, but just the old history there of all those buildings was pretty cool.
I think the vastness, really, like we're so appreciative you flew in to help us navigate the different buildings and the meetings and just figuring out the numbering system for where to find people. And the other piece of that was, NCBA had kind of walked us through sometimes you can meet in unconventional ways, like have your meetings with folks. And we thought they were being a little bit exaggerative, but one of our meetings was in a lunchroom with with our representative, and there's things going on all around you and you have to stay on point and on message. I don't know if I've ever met in a lunchroom at a serious meeting like that in a lunchroom. So they
Well,
do
we thought it
business
was going to
wherever
be
they
in
can
a
do business.
hallway first, but we
Yeah,
moved to the lunchroom.
we moved to the lunchroom.
Well, speaking of unconventional stuff, one thing that was exciting, I guess, and Leoma, I'll kind of toss it over to you as we kind of talk about this, was that we were lucky enough to get access to a White House tour, and we were standing outside the White House waiting to go through security and ended up next to a restaurant owner from LA. And Leoma, you took the opportunity to kind of pull out your camera and do kind of a on the streets interview with him about his thoughts on beef, and as a restaurateur, what are his decision making processes and things like that. Share with our listeners a little bit about that experience, because I thought that conversation was like rich and full of so many good just nuggets of information of what real people in downtown LA that own restaurants might think about beef and beef as a protein in their restaurant.
Well, obviously I'm very shy. And so I never meet people in organic ways. But they were standing behind us, and we ended up striking up a conversation. I can't remember. I think it was because the boys had their cowboy hats on. We were obviously all dressed in Western attire-ish. And I think that was his original comment was, are you guys in town, doing something for a cow group? And it went from there to learning more about him and what he did, to your point. And his big thing was that they just appreciate everything we do. Here's this gentleman who lives in LA, owns 7 restaurants, and we got the opportunity to talk about how we're producing beef, why we were in DC, why it's so important. We even got to raise the point about the gray wolves in California, which he had no idea that those were wreaking some havoc for his northern neighbors, and how he could potentially write his Senate, his congressmen, and impress upon them how important it is to have beef continue through the supply chain and take care of farmers and ranchers. But I asked him, we were having such a great conversation and it was taking a while, and all of us were profusely sweating by that point in our blazers and the boys in their felts. And I just said, do you mind if I record this conversation and we kind of just have, some of this on camera? And he said, absolutely. Out of that, I ended up getting his contact information. We talked to him about potentially next time he's in Montana, because he does come to Montana, having him go visit Garrett's ranch, or, if he happens to be out in Scobey. Sorry, Chance, he might not make it to Scobey as a
Yeah,
restaurateur.
we have great skiing here.
But we were able to have this wonderful experience with these two people who we probably wouldn't have touched just by, I guess, reaching across the sidewalk, because we could have stayed in our group of 4 and just had conversation amongst the 4 of us. And I do think that that's important. We called it beef in the streets. That's what Garrett, I think, gave me that idea. He said, you should do more of this and you should call it beef in the streets. And that is so important to what we do. And so I think that interaction, he sent me all his contact information. We're now friends on all social platforms, and we have the opportunity to engage with him more. That's what this is all about, and that's going to be the sustainability of our industry moving forward.
That's a really cool experience, and awesome that you were able to capitalize on that and do that, because I understand that. Yeah, sometimes not wanting to talk to somebody else or not sure where the conversation's going to go, but that door opened for you guys. I guess I was kind of curious what your guys' thoughts were on why it's important for producers to be involved in advocacy. I feel like you guys have kind of expressed why that's important through your experiences so far, but if you had to put like a finer point on it, what would you say are the important pieces as to why we as producers should be involved in advocacy, both state and federally, and I guess to our neighbors that we run into on the street?
Well, I think it's just important to have someone there representing us, because we can't be there, whether it's you guys in Helena or the NCBA in DC. We have to have someone, or else it will not be good for us.
I find it really important. You know, as a younger guy, the younger generation has to be involved in this stuff and has to fight for ag. It's slowly fading away as an industry. As much as we all love it, less and less people are raising cows and making hay and all that kind of stuff. And the more of us young producers that can be involved and advocate for it and be a good face for the industry, the better it's going to turn out as a whole.
And I live my life by the world is changed by those who show up. And your state affiliate and your national affiliates are producer driven to develop policy. So how can you ever expect policy to be aligned with your values and, where the direction we think the industry should be going if you're not vocalizing that? So it's more important than ever before that we continue to step up and say, hey, this is happening in Waterloo, Montana, or this is happening in Scobey, or this, is what we're facing in Roy. Because if we can find those commonalities and we can create solutions, we are stronger together.
And talking about advocacy, we took the approach when we went to our congressional offices to each kind of hit on a topic, and then I would kind of be cleanup crew to anything that you guys needed me to be cleanup crew to. But let's share with our listeners kind of the 3 key topics that we talked about, because I think you each took a component of the week or the prep that you had learned from either the NCBA staff or YCC and hit on that. So each of you took a topic to talk to our congressional delegation about. So Leoma, you mentioned New World Screwworm. That was kind of your talking point. And so share a little bit just more about our listeners on what we asked for when we were meeting with the delegation and maybe how we educated them on the issue.
Well, I was the data girl throughout the trip. That's what I do for a living. So anything that required remembering facts, statistics, or data, I kind of thought, well, this could be my wheelhouse. So New World Screwworm, I can't say it fast. It was something that NCBA is passionate about, and they explained why. And when they laid out, 700 miles is where the closest is right now. And if you look at the trajectory, how quickly they can cross that 700 miles. So we have the best opportunity to get ahead of this deal by building, a facility here in the States, a domestic facility to produce the sterile flies. And if you have not read up on New World Screwworm, I encourage you to, educate yourselves. There's a lot of information on the ncba.org, and Montana Stalkers has also put out some of that information as well. But we did get that funded. It has been shared on social medias. Secretary Rollins went down there. So the domestic facility has now been funded, which was one of our primary initiatives. And the urgency of that is not to be ignored. I think that it's going to take about 2 years for a brick and mortar to be up running at full capacity. And so while the current facility could produce 117 million sterile flies per week, they're estimating that we need about 350 million to really start getting a handle on this thing again. And long term, they firmly think that instead of us stopping producing flies once we eradicate it in the US again, that we should continue producing those flies and making sure they get into the hands and selling them to the countries that need them. So don't think of this as, oh, we just spent our tax dollars on something that will eradicate again. The long-term plan here is that we recognize other countries don't have those same capabilities to eradicate it. So how can we best put tools in their hands so that they can at least control it in a manageable way? So that was my passion topic. It wasn't really my passion topic, but it was a topic that needed to be discussed. And so I took that one on.
And you mentioned it got funded, so you are
Yeah.
the most efficient lobbyist we've
Ever.
seen so far. Good job, Leoma.
It was that lunchroom conversation.
Yes,
It
exactly.
was all due to the lunchroom conversation.
And Chance, you took the opportunity to talk about the benefits of the checkoff. And so, do you want to share with our listeners what legislation you kind of highlighted as we talked to our offices?
Yeah, I believe it's a bill in the Senate called the Off Act. Right there, right? And it's trying to eliminate all mandatory checkoffs. And I just don't think that would be a great thing at this point in time.
And then Garrett, you kind of took our producer profitability initiative and packaged it up very nicely. And you were able to talk about your personal experience with land values and being a younger or starting producer and the challenge that you face from a tax perspective. So dive a little bit deeper into that and how you shared your story with our elected officials.
Yeah, so I mean, I am pretty passionate about seeing young people, stay an egg and be able to be an egg, and so it kind of fit into what I was wanting to talk about already. I got kind of lucky there, but basically, I touched on the estate tax. That was a big one that we kind of talked about as far as having them keep in mind that as land values go up and that when these ranches are in a transitionary phase, sometimes they can be way over that limit for the estate tax, and that can lead to problems where they have to sell land or sell cows or different things like that. And so I just kind of touched on that and tried to explain how land values in my area are and how we're kind of going to be affected by a lot of that. I also touched a little bit on programs like the FSA has and the USDA and how there's limitations to what you can acquire through those programs, and how as everything's gotten more expensive, those values are going to have to kind of rise and match in order for young producers to utilize those to grow or start operations.
Awesome. Well, I think you guys did a really great job in our delegate meetings or congressional delegation meetings, and you continue to be great advocates. You kind of wrapped up your DC time with the pack auction that NCBA puts on, but also just wanted to quickly hit on the fact that each YCC class then votes on, and I don't even know what you call it. What do you call it?
A chair?
Miscongeniality, a chair. A chair to represent your class and help host the next YCC group moving into 2026. And I do have to say that we had two really great campaign managers between between Chance and Garrett, because Leoma was elected as that chair. So congratulations, Leoma. And I believe you are the first female in the history of YCC to be elected to be the leader for the next YCC group as well. So share with us just a little bit about what that role entails, how, and you might not even know yet because it's still pretty fresh and new, but how you'll engage with the planning moving into next year, and then you'll go on the trip next year as well, correct?
Yes. So I don't know about miscongeniality, first of all, Raylee, because I think if it was miscongeniality, Garrett would have got it instead of me.
Ugh.
Um, but
He does have that
but
$1,000,000
no,
smile.
I was gonna say he's tremendous. It is a great honor, and I'm so grateful. It's oftentimes in this industry that the experience with the different segments and kind of being able to navigate all of that. Coming back next year, helping the crew who's incoming. I mean, Ryan Peterson was our chair this year from Five Rivers. He's general manager there. And I just can't say enough good things about Ryan. He really was our resource when we would say, what's happening? What do we need to do? What does this look like? Or if you're more introverted or maybe more of a planner like I was, we could go to Ryan and he would outline what that next day or the expectations were. And so that's our chairs just help folks, integrate, or if if there's any way that they can make it a better experience, improve upon, to your point, in the planning process. So one of the things that our group was big on, I think this was driven by Garrett and Trace from Five Rivers, was music. I think they door dashed a speaker before our second plane ride just so that we could have music on the buses and such. And what that brought together the fellowship, right, is because this really is a grueling process. My Fitbit said I averaged 4.5 hours of sleep a night. And so one of the things that you go into it thinking is, how can we make this experience something that everyone puts their best foot forward every day? And our chair really did that for us. Like he inspired us each morning. The NCBA crew is also tremendous for that. And so that's what I view moving into next year, is just how can I inspire those young folks coming on this journey to really understand that this is something you're going to look back years from now and be so incredibly grateful that you were there, and make sure to live in the moment. The stuff at home is going to be there when we get home. There were folks in our group dealing with some different things going on at home. Garrett said his day 6 was kind of the tipping point for his business at home, and Chance had, everyone has these different moving parts and pieces. And what we tried to do was lift each other up in those moments and just say, continue to embrace the journey as it arrives today, because all of those to-do lists will be there when we get home. So like I said, I'm grateful. And by the way, Rayleigh, I did want to set the record straight because I had a gentleman who was chair in, I think, 84, tell me that Sherry Spader, which is Brett Spader's mom, served as the first female chair back in the 80s. I have not confirmed that with Sherry, but I am very happy to be the second in that 40-year stretch. And so kudos for Sherry for breaking that glass ceiling back in the 80s.
Well, next year's class is lucky to have you. We were really excited to hear that you were elected. So from all three of you guys, what advice would you give to a young producer or a rancher who's considering YCC, maybe is on the fence? What advice would you give?
Do it.
It was a long 10 days for me, but it was so worth it, and I think it's going to be valuable for the rest of my life.
if you can figure out a way to make it work, and maybe you're not at the right point, but set yourself a goal. So 5 years ago, I really wanted to do this, and I wasn't at the right time. It was not the right timing for me, but I kept it on that vision board, and I said, I'm going to make this work one of these days. And you have to make it a priority, in my opinion, if this is something you want to do, because it changed it definitely changed how I looked at some aspects of our industry in the different segments.
Yeah, same. I wanted to do it well, it was before COVID. I wanted to go, and I tried to apply at COVID and then didn't happen. But yeah, I've been wanting to do this for a long time.
And don't think you're too old. If you're sitting out there, if you're below 50, you can do it. Promise. And you will sleep again at some point. And look at me, I'm going back for a second time. So it's doable, even if you think you're just on that right side of that bell-shaped curve. Just do it.
Yeah, I think if you're thinking about it or you're on the fence, you definitely should. I really enjoyed it. It's cool to see, like I said before, just the industry at a scale, and see what else is out there, and it gives you perspective when you come home to your own operation, and you just can't find that kind of perspective anywhere. So if nothing else, that's the reason to go.
Well, thank you guys for going. In listening to this too, I do really appreciate you sharing your experiences with our congressional delegation. I think, Raylee and I talk to them regularly, and they do, like you said, they do want to hear from ranchers in Montana, but actually hearing from the ranchers, hearing from you guys, and you guys tying in your personal experiences makes our job easier. So we appreciate that.
And also, I think a huge shout out to our Young Stock Growers group, as well as the Montana Stock Growers Foundation, who actually provided scholarships and grant money for these three individuals to attend as part of the program. Is a huge thanks that we need to extend as well. So as we kind of wrap up, any final comments for you guys? I'm excited to see, you were shoved into a lot of situations and a lot of information headed your way, and excited to see how you guys, incorporate that into our policy discussions or the committees that you serve on, or, through the leadership groups that you're a part of. And so any final comments or closing thoughts that each of you would like to share with our listeners about either, what you learned on the trip, or anything that you think that we really need to have on our radar moving into the future as it relates to the cattle industry?
I guess my final thing would be, as I always say, eat beef and support your local rancher. You got to have that in there. But really, it's just when you're out in your day to day, just make sure to advocate for ranching and be a good representation of what ag can be. You might be waiting for a White House tour in DC, and run into a restaurant owner from California and have a great experience. But if you're not ready and kind of having that on the front of your mind, you won't be able to create that connection. So that's probably my biggest thing I want to have as a takeaway.
How about you, Chance?
Yeah, I'll extend my thank you to Young Stock Growers and the board of the foundation. I think, yeah, probably wouldn't have been able to make it work if I had to pay the full tuition to this program.
I would say I echo Chance's sentiments. We were so grateful to represent Montana stock growers and really reach out to folks. And one of the things to keep in mind is growth happens outside of our comfort zones. We were 62 people put together and, spent 9 days together. But when you go to convention in December in Billings, and you always find yourself going maybe into the same circles, challenge yourself to meet some new people. Really go over and shake someone's hand who maybe you've never had a conversation with before, because sometimes the connectivity is what someone is looking for and needs. And even in our trip, there was folks who it took them a little bit to warm up, but then once they warmed up, they were just these massive contributors to the conversation. And I think that's what I'm going to take forward, is how do we go into those rooms that sometimes we gravitate toward the folks that we know, but maybe we just make a stop on the way and recognize those who we haven't seen at a function before, draw them into conversation, and really see how we can best support them in their stock growers journey. So that's my advice, and what I took away from that was, I don't know, it's talking's obviously my problem point. So, make yourself go talk to people.
Well, those are excellent pieces of advice for everything YCC and otherwise. So we appreciate that coming from you guys. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Thank you for representing stock growers in Montana and DC as well. I know you guys did a great job. And thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing your insights. If you're a listener and you're interested in applying for the 2026 YCC conference, please reach out to us here at the Stock Growers Office. We'd love to chat with you about it. You can also check out our website at mtbeef.org. As always, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. It's everywhere. So thank you so much.